and welcome to What's Happening. In this week's special edition, we take a quick look back at a few stories covered by Real Media during 2021. In January, Palestine Action targeted UAV Engines Limited in Staffordshire for a third time, blocking the gates and closing the factory for the day. UAV is a subsidiary of Israeli arms manufacturer Elbit Systems, which makes drones used against civilians in the illegally occupied territories in Palestine. Earlier this month, the three activists were found not guilty at Staffordshire Crown Court after persuading the judge that they were acting proportionately given what they know about Elbit's business.
We won, we were found not guilty. The significance of this is huge. It shows, for one, that the judiciary in Britain and the judge who was in front of us accept that what this company is up to is horrific to the extent that it's proportionate and reasonable to take action against them. The judge very clearly listened to what we had to say. He wanted to hear about Palestine, about what Elbit Systems were doing to Palestinians. And, this is a huge win. It shows that Elbit Systems, they are the ones who are the criminals.
In February, we showed how police were using COVID restrictions to close down safe and socially distanced protests.
Obviously, I know you want to keep everyone safe, but I'm hoping that we can come to an agreement.
There will be no agreement, there will be no demonstration today.
A small group of Kurdish people held an annual anniversary and protest against the continued detention and torture of Abdullah Öcalan by the Turkish state.
For 22 years, Abdullah Öcalan has been kept on a Turkish island prison, guarded by 1,000 soldiers, completely cut off from the world. Despite that, he has written and declared a paradigm of democracy, ecology and women's liberation to the entire world. And still, the Turkish state keep him in total and aggravated isolation.
Police intervened, appearing to make the situation worse.
Everybody wear masks and 2 meters social distance, please.
The policing by the London Metropolitan Police is ironic because the protest was socially distanced, healthy, but since they've interfered, the protest became unhealthy and actually risky in terms of COVID. If they were to collaborate with the community, it would have been a short, peaceful and healthy demonstration. But actually we see that the more they interfere, the less healthy they make the conditions.
In March, there were protests against NHS privatisation by stealth after dozens of GP practices were sold off to giant US health insurer Centene.
GP practices have been sold off to a company called Operos, which has Centene, an American insurance company, behind them.
Nobody's telling the GPs that by complying with all this change, they're actually cutting their own throats. They're diminishing their own professionalism, and they're allowing themselves to be replaced by something far more inferior.
They cut services in the GP surgeries they take over so that they'll make more money. A lot of money that is given to the NHS is for IT systems that are about getting mineable data. The NHS does need more money, but the money has to be given to the right things.
In April, a jury at Southwark Crown Court acquitted 7 activists who had smashed glass doors and sprayed paint at the Shell HQ in protest at the oil company's part in climate breakdown. Judge Perrins instructed the jury that there was no defence in law, but a majority, 10 or 11, of the jurors decided to overrule the instruction and vindicate the actions of the protesters after hearing why they had acted against the corporation.
The jury were in tears as they delivered the verdict. And for me, this is just such an absolute goddamn vindication of the conscience of Extinction Rebellion.
I am so grateful to 10 or 11 of the jury who took such a huge and brave step. I feel so proud of them.
We were allowed to give all our evidence about why we did it, about the climate, about extinction, and we were allowed to appeal directly to the jury
They were being shown that we were clearly guilty, but we were arguing that we weren't guilty.
It's the nearest thing we have in the UK with any powers where ordinary people off the street can actually make a decision that will send echoes, higher up the establishment.
The honesty of people, when they're not being lobbied by money, they know what is needed.
They completely voted for the evidence rather than for what the law said they had to do.
Ordinary people maybe can be trusted to make the right decision.
These police officers should be arresting the criminals who are stealing the future from our children.
When we were arrested and taken to the police station, they took this off us and the policeman said, the chance of you seeing this again, sir, are precisely 0. There you go, it's all back.
Our bail conditions no longer apply. We can go back to Shell. We can tell the truth to the world again.
In May, another oil company, BP, drew a more theatrical but messy protest outside its annual general meeting in London.
We stand here in direct resistance to BP's ecocidal and ultimately genocidal trajectory that is not only violating our lands and waters, but is actively destroying our chances of a future and our chances of our communities surviving in a just way. They say that they are changing their pathway, or they say they're moving towards a just transition, but really there is no justice because the money that they have is tainted with the blood of our communities globally.
Indigenous communities such as the Ogoni people have had to resist and rise up for decades in order for some semblance of justice. The Paris Agreement is to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. And there is no chance of adaptation if we're continuing to spend billions on new explorations.
Throughout the year, Palestine Action continued to take direct action against Elbit Systems and its subsidiaries, and in June, among their targets were suppliers in Runcorn and in Birmingham.
There is an arms factory supplying parts to Elbit Systems, and we're bringing them to light.
This is the first time that Palestine Action is expanding to target companies outside of Elbit specifically. I'm on the roof of APPH today. So APPH produce parts for Elbit Systems, and Elbit Systems produces drones for Israel. I haven't ever sort of engaged in direct action in this way, but when I saw Palestine Action I thought, this is a really concrete, meaningful thing that you can do.
Elbit Systems, shame on you! Elbit Systems, shame on you!
The UK government is fully in favour of mowing the lawn, as they call it, when they go and murder people in Gaza, and very directly, we literally build the stuff in this country.
Elbit factories are down the road from normal everyday civilians, from jobs, from school children, and I am just disgusted by the thought that we live in a country where our government is complicit in such horrendous action.
I'm willing to be arrested because that is a small price to pay compared to being murdered in your own home for the crime of being Palestinian.
I'm taking action against a company called Arconic for their lack of remorse and responsibility in the case of the Grenfell Tower fire and their continuation in arming Israel in the genocide and expulsion of Palestine.
The cladding that was used in that building is made by this company.
And they were the main contributor to the rapid spread of fire, which ultimately took 72 lives. He also has links to what is currently happening in Gaza. They manufacture parts for Lockheed Martin's Type F-35 Lightning fighter jet.
Palestine Action are inheritors of the tradition of the suffragettes, of the Chartists, a proud tradition in this country of civil disobedience.
In July, 5 climate activists faced trial for an action at the Brazilian embassy. They were found guilty and given suspended prison sentences, unpaid work and fines and damages. 2 were also given 3-month curfews.
If we speak about Mother Earth, for example, in my country, the
oil companies, they are cutting down the trees and contaminating with chemical things the earth or the rivers, so it's going worse.
And it's particularly the indigenous people who are living in harmony with nature who are protecting those lands, and there's incredible pressure from mining companies, from oil and from all sorts of different pressures, and unfortunately they're being murdered on a weekly basis.
And I think if we in this country close our eyes to what's going on right now, then it's going to be our children paying the price.
Every human being, we have to be together to protect the Mother Earth.
In August, Real Media premiered a documentary on the first year of Palestine Action.
Looks like they've caused some damage.
What are you doing on the roof?
Nothing we shouldn't be doing.
If you haven't seen it yet, it's still available in the link below. Later in the month, as part of their August rebellion, Extinction Rebellion worked with other groups to highlight the part played by the City of London in the climate and ecological crisis.
This institution of the City of London Corporation, with its financial tentacles reaching around the planet, is responsible for as much as 15% of global emissions.
Within those walls that we soaked with blood, people were sold for profit.
This government, these corporations, these banks have benefited of taking from our community. This is where we need to stand united. We don't want your blood money. We want to save the world, honey. We don't want your blood money. We want to save the world, honey. Decolonize. Decolonize.
If you're more worried about your daily commute not being delayed rather than billions of people suffering and dying and all the beautiful flora and fauna disappearing, then I think you should consider your priorities in life.
In September, we joined young activists exposing the failings of the World Wildlife Fund, filming their occupation of the WWF headquarters in Woking.
Countless communities across Africa and Asia are being violently evicted by the eco-guards that WWF trains, equips, finances and supports, and by WWF's conservation partners. And these are not just a few bad apples. These abuses and evictions are systemic.
Indigenous people, they're 5% of the population and they protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. It's their conservation methods and their knowledge that we need, and they've been doing it for generations. And WWF coming in, deciding that Western conservation is the ideal, the thing we should be doing. Even, creating connections with companies like Coca-Cola, companies like Shell, supporting work of these companies to use that land for profit.
How is it possible that most of WWF's board members are corporate people rather than ecologists?
Although staff initially entered into dialogue, the Director of Conservation and Science refused to engage with or even listen to the concerns of Indigenous activists speaking from areas where they claim the WWF is supporting land grabs.
We work with various Indigenous groups that right now are being evicted. There are 2 leaders from Tanzania, 2 leaders from Kenya, and 2 leaders from Cameroon. And so we are happy to set up a Zoom call for you to have a conversation with these communities that are basically ready to speak with you.
And to be clear, I'm not going to be doing that today. If there isn't anything further that you want to discuss with us today, then I would politely ask that you leave at this point.
I just want to be clear. You've been given a direction to leave now, if that's right.
So currently the team is locking on for all the people that are willing to be taken in, and we'll just have to be removed.
Although police were called and staff abandoned the building after 4 days, the activists left without any arrests.
So we are leaving, but we are leaving with our heads held high. We are leaving to regroup, to regather. We stand in solidarity with you, our partners across the world. Thank you, huge love. This campaign continues. And so finally, what the fuck, WWF?
In October, we started our weekly news roundup and newsletter with the help of our colleagues at Phoenix Media Co-op, and we broadcast 10 episodes and a compilation to date. We hope to continue after a short break in the new year, but this takes a lot of time and effort, so we really need your help to keep going. 2022 promises to be a year of polarised opinions, an authoritarian crackdown on protest, worse treatment of refugees, and more cuts to public services. To keep bringing you honest news from the grassroots, we need to build up small monthly donations from our viewers and subscribers. Please help us create and expand a people's media that works for all of us and covers these truly important stories when no one else is. That's all for 2021. We wish you all the best for 2022. Please remember to like, subscribe and share. See you next year.